Welcome to Between Sundays. I'm Tyler, and when all I owned was taken from me, I accepted it with joy. Today we're lifting our eyes above the corn to escape the maze, but before we receive all that was promised because of our patient endurance, now that they've arrived at the sweet, sweet promise of apple cider slushies, let's welcome in our favorite co-hosts, Maren and Barry. Good day, guys.
Good day.
Here we are. And a great good
Hey,
hoopamane to you.
Yeah.
Hoopamane to you.
Hoopamane.
And also with you. And also with you.
Hey, I don't know about you guys, but
Eager to navigate the fun.
That's great. I love
that's
that
where
new
I
one.
am today.
Eager to navigate the
Fun.
Oh man.
You have entirely too much fun with those sound bites.
I was like, there's only one thing I can take from this. There's only one thing I can take from this sermon, and it's...
Eager to navigate the fun.
You sound like you're like 80 years old saying that.
You sound so fraught.
Yeah.
You're like eager to navigate the fun. Was that from 11?
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, man. Guys, it's been a couple weeks.
It has been.
We were blindsided by MLK Day and just did not do a pod that day. So
Blindsided.
we were off. We didn't see it coming. So we took a week off last week, but we're back. And Barry, you
I'm doing so well.
are back from the dead.
Oh
Like,
my
what's going
gosh.
on here?
Between MLK Day and today, I went through one of the worst flus I've ever had of my life. And I mean, it was like last Wednesday and Thursday, I was just sick, like sicker than I think I've ever been.
You kept sending the pastor's messages. You kept saying, guys,
I think I'm turning a
I
corner.
think this is the sickest I've ever been.
Yeah.
Guys,
yeah.
this is honestly the sickest I've ever been.
I kept saying it because I kept thinking that, oh, this is it. No, it's just a 1 day thing. Oh, no, just a 2 day thing.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going on 3 days and I'm still really, really sick. And I kept having to reschedule a ton of stuff and I had to miss governing board. I mean, it was an ordeal. It was an ordeal. So I think I'm okay now, but it's the kind of sick where like you don't even want to watch a show or read a book because you're just like,
miserable.
your head is in a vice and you just can't even think straight. And all you can do is just like sit in the cool of the shade, but not too cool because then you will get too cold and you have to like, but then your body switches and all of a sudden you're sweating and it's miserable. So
It's that time of year.
yeah.
it
Everybody's
is.
sick with something. Maren, you were sick about a month ago.
I was sick right after Christmas. I climbed Christmas Mountain and got real sick.
Fell right down off the other side.
That's right.
Shout out to my lovely wife, Olivia, who had to put up not just with taking care of me and all the animals while I was completely bedridden, but had to put up with me being like so debilitated about that I couldn't help out, that I kept apologizing. She started saying things like, if you say sorry one more time.
Yeah, you're going to sleep outside.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, shout out to Liv. She did a great job of taking care of me. I don't do great as a victim.
Yeah, well, how would Olivia describe you as a sick person?
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What kind of sick person are
I'm
you?
stubborn. I will say that I'm doing better than I am. I will refuse to take medicine.
The do too much kind of sick guy?
Yeah.
My dad's that way. He's like trying to prove to everybody that he's not sick, but he's like hacking everywhere. And
Yeah. I do that not so much to prove to other people, just to prove to myself. Cause I'm like, I can't be sick. I've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
I've been saying on Saturday, I had stuff planned all day on Sunday. Like I had meetings planned. I was going to be at church. I was going to do the welcome party and stuff. And so I was like gearing up for that and convincing myself I'm doing okay. And then Liv was like, Barry, you are very sick. And it finally clicked and I realized, okay, if my Saturday self, if I felt that way on any other like day of the week randomly,
I'd be
be like, oh man, I'm super sick. I'm staying home. But because of how bad it had been on Wednesday and Thursday, I was like, I'm a new man. I may be getting winded, like walking from the kitchen to the living room, but
making your bed.
that was an ordeal. But I was so stubborn. I was like, I'm the one who drenched this bed in sweat last night. I'm going to be the one to change the sheets and put it back together.
Well,
so
do you guys sleep in the same room when you're sick?
Yeah. Well, I stopped because I was like waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat. I'm like, I'm going to the guest room. So I'd sleep in the guest room and then I don't wake her up with my coughing and stuff.
The worst thing about the two of you, the worst thing is that neither one of you take medicine. You're
I
just
do
like,
take medicine. I'm
I don't-
learning.
not
I'm
gonna go
learning
to the
how.
doctor. I'm against antibiotics. Like I'm not gonna.
Hey, no one ever said against. No one said. I just don't want it to be the first thing I run to. You know,
And
I want to give the body a fighting chance.
It's not the first thing you run to. It was the first time you ran to it
Yeah,
in
pretty
your
much.
life.
Yeah, that you know,
A month ago.
you're getting real deep. This goes back to being raised by two parents who didn't believe in health insurance. At least
Yeah.
I have that.
Yeah. Well, I'm not against medicine. I am against taking unnecessary antibiotics. And so if I've got a flu, which is a virus, I will not take antibiotics because you will literally only hurt yourself. And I care about my gut biome, you know?
Oh, yeah,
I don't want to wipe
it's
them
your
out.
second brain.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
I've been
That's
told.
right. So anyway,
You guys aren't into this gut science?
I am now.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere I look.
Yep.
gut health.
It's gut health. Everyone knows you're in your 40s. It's time to talk
Time
about
to talk about gut health.
Yeah. Marin, what's new with you?
What is new with me? I've been applying to seminaries.
Oh,
Am I allowed to talk about this
Yeah.
out loud on this podcast?
let's do it. We've talked about it before.
I
haven't
haven't-
we?
I don't know
have
what
it
we've
here.
mentioned or what we haven't mentioned,
Huh.
but
Well, let's
January.
pretend we haven't.
I said what's new, and I have very sick, recovering. Marin Seminary. Are we allowed to
So we
talk?
said it the same way.
Yeah, I have a question mark
Seminary?
right next to it.
No, I applied to 2 seminaries. I've already heard back from one, and I'm waiting to hear back from the other. So and it was a yes. I got in.
Yeah, that-
I got in.
Yeah.
I got into Trinity.
When you don't say,
and I'm waiting
they
to hear
said
back
yes.
from another.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
No.
it's
it's
Trinity. That's in Illinois.
Yes.
Great. Congratulations.
All the classes would be online, but yeah, it was really, really exciting. So January has been weird. It's been, the application process is different for each school, and some are longer than others. It's been a lot of essay writing, and thank you for your kind letter of recommendation,
Yeah,
Pastor Barry.
I meant some of it.
Oh,
No,
thanks.
it was-
I thanks for asking me to write a
I'll-
letter of recommendation.
It's a seminary.
Yeah.
No, I got a good recommendation from Tim Ayers. I got a good
yeah.
recommendation from you
Sounds
and,
good.
and a few others.
That's
but
great.
yeah, it's been a busy month. And then, you asked me. Well, I guess maybe I'm giving it away, but you asked me on my birthday last year. You said, "Happy birthday! How do you feel about preaching back to back in January?"
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Eager to navigate the fun.
that's exactly how it feels. Yeah, I'm eager to navigate the fun. So I've been pacing myself. It's just
Yeah.
been learning a new rhythm. And
Yeah.
there's been many times where I've sat in my office thinking, how does Barry do this? How does he do this week over week
and,
over
and
week?
there was a point where when I started doing it, and I was like, how does my dad do this? And so
That's where I'm
it's-
at.
It's part of it.
Yeah.
It's totally doable, and I'm sure it'll be great. And you'll probably the second time you'll be like, I just wish I had more time, but it's just how it goes. It'll
So, Marin, you're waiting to hear back from another seminary,
Mhm.
but you're already accepted. So, if you were to go with whatever, when would you start?
Spring, March.
So, like 6 weeks.
yeah, let's go.
it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Let's go.
Wow.
If you're going to do it, just do it.
Are you good? Are you gonna go on vacation before? It's like
no.
This is like a baby moon or something. Like you got. It's like before I get into this big endeavor, I
No.
need some time.
I don't think like that. I don't think like that. What I want to do is put my Christmas decorations away before
Oh, yeah, that's
I
probably a good start.
seminary in March. That's my big goal.
Is Jed feeling a certain way about being the only person in your house that
Not
is not
currently.
going to school?
Not currently enrolled in school.
Yeah.
No, see, he's the guy in the
He's
middle of
fine?
the maze. He's already led the way. He's
Okay. Oh yeah, he's already
got
been
his
through
undergrad.
It. Yeah.
That's right. He's helping us all apply for
All right.
FAFSA.
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah. All right. Well, congrats. You'll have to
Yeah,
let
thank
us
you.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you to do seminary. I just think, oh man, you're gonna eat it up. I think you're just gonna love.
Am I going to
study.
eat it up or is it going to eat me up?
Yeah, both.
Both,
It's,
probably,
it's
yeah.
it's like a snake eating its own tail.
Oh,
you
it's
know?
going to be
Yeah.
so fun.
No, it's
Navigate the fun.
because it's so much work. It's obviously a ton of
Yeah.
reading. It's lots of writing, but like throughout it, it's so different than like high school or undergrad where you're just trying to get through. You're just trying to get
Yeah.
your degree. You're just trying to seminary. You're doing this because it's shaping you with the
'Cause you want
career
to.
that you're called to
Yeah.
or that you're passionate about. And so
Yeah. And
You'll-
engaging me in the things that I already care deeply
and so
about.
like one book you'll be like, okay, that's fine. I'll just read it so I can do the online posts. And then the other book you'll be like, I'm going to keep this book forever.
Mhm.
And it's changing my perspective on
Yeah.
theology. And so it's fun that you get to do that. It's like you get to do that
Yeah.
for fun. So
Yeah, I'm super, super excited and grateful for the opportunity.
My favorite part so far is Marin telling me all the things I don't know, like about the Bible. Like you
What?
already do that.
and now
don't-
Marin
I don't
will
walk
do
No,
that
around
Marin
too.
will
doing
also
that.
do that. Like last night, we were praying, and she said, comfort with the rod and your staff,
Yeah.
comforter or whatever. We left, and she was like, "Did you know comfort actually means not what you think it means, Tyler?"
Yeah, it's not like a giant, big, comfy blankie.
Yeah, it's like
thy
hitting,
rod and
hitting-
thy staff,
yeah,
they
hitting the
comfort me.
sheep.
It's hitting the sheep. It is tap, tap,
Yeah, tap, tap
to keep the sheep
Yeah.
from veering off the path. Yes.
That's
yes.
what the
And I was
word-
like,
Oh, I didn't.
So
know
when
that.
we veer,
Sure.
yeah.
tap, tap, comfort us back into place, essentially.
Yeah.
Not like,
So seminary
Yeah,
is just
snuggle
gonna
us.
like
Thy
it's
rod
just
and
gonna
thy
be something
staff,
new
they
every day.
snuggle us.
It'll be a fun fact bonanza.
you're gonna be so well equipped
watch
for.
out.
Yeah,
Watch out.
Yeah. Guys, my wife is a part of a book club,
Mm.
and she's been a part of a book club for a year. And to celebrate that year, I think it's a celebration of the year, but they took a book club retreat. So that means Barry's looking at me like I looked at
I have
her
so many
when she told
questions.
me there was a book club retreat. It was like the ladies who are in this book club went over to one of their houses overnight, and they did things like puzzles and games. And the idea was that they were going to like read and just kind of chill for 30 hours. So she did that this past weekend. That
Yeah.
was her retreat. And so I've known about this for forever and or for a while. They've been planning it for a while. And I've known this whole time, like, I'm going to have all 3 kids for that period.
Just
No problem.
overnight.
Yeah, just overnight. No problem. It was on Lane's actual birthday. But I was like, all right, yeah, we'll find something fun to do. So one of the guys who's one of my friends is the husband of the person who was hosting this thing at their house. And he was like, hey, I'm getting kicked out of my house. So can I bring my kids over to your house and spend the night?
How many kids?
He has 2 boys,
Okay. How old?
8 and 4, 5.
Is that same age as
Yeah,
Milo
about
and
the
Lane?
same age
Yeah.
as our boys. So I was like, yeah, great. Our house is not big. Like he has a big house,
Yeah.
which can fit all of these women
Yeah.
in their own beds
Wow.
for the retreat.
Mhm.
My house, we are already full. Like we don't have any spare rooms or beds. So I was like, either you and I are going to have to sleep in my bed or you're going to have to sleep on the couch. And so he slept on the couch. But we were 2 things about this weekend. Lauren did a great job. She worked really hard to like get the house ready.
Mhm.
Because otherwise I would have been just like, yeah, just come over or whatever. Like not thinking about the state of the house.
Yeah,
at all.
don't step in that dish.
Yes.
Watch out for that. Watch out for that
Yeah.
cheese stick.
Yeah. So, so she did things like got him a pillow and sheets and
Oh, that's
to
thoughtful.
put on the couch and things like that. Made sure there were towels.
The basics.
Yeah.
The basics.
Yeah. Stuff I never would have thought of.
Here's a blanket.
Yeah. Yeah. So he was on his way over to my house and I was like, she had been gone by that point, but he was like, hey, we're on our way. And that text triggered something in me that was like, oh, we have no like food or drinks for like snacks. There's going to be 4 boys here and us. Like,
Yeah.
what are we going to do? Like we have no plans. We have no snacks, no food. So I was like, all right, I'll go to the store and I'll get some snacks. And I didn't ask him what he wanted. And he was like, great, I'll just stop by and get something too. And so he got to my house and I pulled out of my Target bag, the grocery store that's closest, a box of Cheez-Its and a thing of Gatorade, like a 6-pack or whatever of Gatorade. He pulls out of his bag a box of Cheez-Its.
Let's go.
and a thing of Gatorade.
No
we got the
way.
same thing for snacks.
Oh man.
Wow.
So that's
Kindred spirit.
that's what we were dealing with. That was the like
The kids lived on Cheez-Its and Gatorade
yeah, and I mean we did like Chick-fil-A for meals
Okay.
and stuff, but
for all of your meals?
no, we
I
did
need to know what these children ate,
So we
Tyler.
did Chick-fil-A for lunch,
Uh-huh.
pizza for dinner,
Yeah.
donuts for breakfast the next morning. It was just like, what's around here and delivers. And so that's story number one, is that we were ill prepared and I did not even think about things like sheets.
Cheez-Its and Gatorade.
But we both got the same snack. The second story is, Barry, you're sick. You're recovering.
Yeah.
My
sick.
kids are now sick and recovering because so Milo got pulled out of school yesterday. Lane got pulled out of school today. We took them over this retreat weekend. We took them to a place in Castleton that Maren told me not to say the name.
No, this is not good press.
So took them to this place. It's basically like an indoor jungle gym, ball pit.
Yeah.
There's like this rice pit.
Wait,
A rice pit?
Yeah,
mixed in with
it's like a sensory thing. Like you like sit in the rice and like scoop it and.
Okay, so but is it like a table or is it like as big as the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese and it's rice?
Yeah.
That sounds like
That's what it is.
Nightmare disaster.
Yes.
Are you just finding rice all over your home?
I'm also just a little concerned about like the global hunger that could have been averted by all that
I
rice.
saw a kid take an entire bucket of rice and dump it on his head.
I mean, I would, right?
Her head. So like she had rice all over her hair. Anyways,
So
we
there's
took them
rice
to
in
this
your car.
place. Yeah, there's rice everywhere. And while we were there were hundreds of kids there. I was like, oh man, I bet we're not going to walk out of here without some kind of disease. And sure enough, 2 days later,
That's it.
falling like flies.
It's really hard to sterilize each granule of rice.
Or
Yeah.
each ball
With a Clorox wipe.
You could spread. I'm sure they wash them all.
Yeah.
regularly.
Yeah. I sent Maren a text this weekend and I was just like, this is my complete nightmare. This is the worst. Because here's why it's the worst. Lou is not 2 yet.
Right.
So in order for her to go in the ball pit, guess who else has to go into the ball pit? I have to join her in the ball pit.
That
so I'm
made
standing
my
in the
whole day.
I'm standing in the ball pit. She's sitting in the ball pit. She wants to go up and like go through the tubes and find the slide and go down the slide, but she gets stuck or she gets lost. And so she's like screaming her head off. She's crying. And the only way to get her down is for me to climb up like the net and the rock wall and go through these tubes, and all these kids are like going this way and I'm trying to go this
Sneezing
way
in
and we're
your
like
mouth
squeezing
as they
by
go.
each other in the tube. And I finally find her. She's losing her mind and we go down the slide and then she's like, I want to do that again.
But you managed to climb through the tube with your cell phone in hand, because what you sent me was a video as though you were like a National Geographic explorer.
I was like, I'm crawling through this tube.
I'm in the tube. I'm in the tube. I'm going to retrieve my daughter. And I was sitting in front of my fireplace with my feet up on the couch. And the reason it's funny, the reason he sends me videos like that is because we're the same age. And he is climbing through tubes and braving ball pits, and my children are driving to work.
Yeah. She just sent me a picture of her and Jed just in their jammies on the couch. Oh, enough of what's new. We're here to talk about, well, we skipped out on week 1 of the sermon series.
Right.
Because it was the beginning of the year. We skipped out on week 3 of the sermon series, but we're going to do our best and talk about week 4 of our current sermon series, Endurance. Maren, you're here because you preached your first of 2 back-to-back sermons.
Yeah.
Can you kind of give us a recap or a big idea of what you shared this past weekend?
Yeah, so each weekend we've been looking at that word, hupomone, the Greek word for endurance and steadfastness, perseverance. And each week, Barry, in the sermon series overview, had a different kind of theme associated with the passage. So we're not, going through a book. We're kind of touching on different passages throughout the New Testament where this word is found. It's 32 times it's mentioned in the New Testament. And sometimes it's in relation to hope, and sometimes it's in relation to, in this week's was perspective. Looking back, looking forward, and gaining some perspective and how that helps us to endure. So the passage was Hebrews 10, and we talked about the writer to the Hebrews and why he would have been encouraging these Hebrews to endure. We talked about some of the persecution that they were facing and all of that. and how he instructs them, they will be able to continue to endure hardship. It's by holding on to the promises of God. So that was the big idea, gaining perspective and holding on to the promises of God.
So shout out to Dave Baldwin. I love it when people, friends of the pod who listen to the show are like, hey, can you bring this up on the show? Because
I think I know where you're going.
Because I saw him yesterday and he was like, hey, because Maren went down the list. She kind of gave like the backstory or some world behind the text of the book of Hebrews.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things is we don't really know who wrote the book of Hebrews.
Mm-hmm.
But you went down a list of like 3 people who it could have been.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think I said 4. But
Fine.
then he hit me with another, and
Yeah.
I had never even considered it.
Priscilla.
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, he was like,
See, you went to seminary. I didn't.
yeah.
Well,
I'm kidding.
Yeah. 6 weeks from now, you'll be able to
like,
you
oh,
would have
I
said
knew
that.
it.
Hey, you guys, it could be Priscilla.
Yeah. So he included him,
Priscilla's a woman.
It's her.
her. Okay.
One of Priscilla and Aquila were like Paul's.
Yeah, I know Priscilla and
coworkers.
Aquila. I just never know which one's the man and woman.
Priscilla. It's the
I know,
woman.
but I've always been like, maybe they switched the name to be a girl name now.
Nah, but I thought that was really cool. He mentioned that to me after service, and that there's some book where it's trying to kind of make the case for it could be maybe that Priscilla actually was the author of Hebrews, and that's why the author would have perhaps remained anonymous,
Yeah.
and not been mentioned. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a really cool theory, book
Yeah.
worth reading.
Yeah. Okay. So you shared a story about your grandma.
Yeah.
And her faith. And the last time you saw her face to face was not quite a year ago. It was like maybe half a
I
year
actually
ago.
saw her in September for her 99th birthday.
Okay.
But yeah, in June she would have been 98, and that's when I stayed with her that night.
And your aunt passed away during that period.
Yeah.
And that is the second child that she's lost.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So her prayer, if you haven't watched the sermon yet, I really highly encourage you to do
same.
that, because it was a great sermon, but also this story touched me and gave me like, it sparked a lot of questions. Her prayer, you said you prayed with her, and her prayer, kind of before your aunt had passed away, was like, give her the strength for what she's about to endure.
Yeah, for what I'm about to go through.
Yeah.
Lord, give me the strength for what I'm about to go through.
And one of the things that stood out to me is that this perspective, the thing that you said, this is who my grandmother is, this faith seemingly only possible with a lifetime of endurance. Like she didn't wake up at 99 and be like, just Lord, give me the strength for this terrible thing that I've already experienced in my life. You know, like,
Oh yeah.
I think it's easy for me to look at her and say, I want to be just like that when I'm older, but then look at circumstances today or whatever. And whether it's broken relationships or loneliness or circumstantial pain, and seeing so many people running the opposite way of endurance. It's like they're running toward convenience and comfort. And I follow so many people on social media. I know so many people who seemingly have turned away from enduring, and turned away from the Lord and their faith because of whatever reason. And so I was with someone actually this past weekend who told me they're leaving the church because they haven't jived with the last few sermons. Their pastor, it's not at Grace, but they haven't jived with the last few sermons that that was the language that they use. We haven't really jived with the last few sermons or the preacher has preached. So we're going to be looking for other churches. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, that's not Maren's grandma. Like Maren's grandma would have like, there's no way she's turning away and like
I
going
would
towards comfort
imagine
and
your grandma
convenience.
would set up a meeting with the pastor.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. She's been part of the same church. My grandma lived through the civil rights movement. Again, she's 99 years old.
Yeah. Sure.
She came up to Chicago through the Great Migration. And she's been at the same church since like the 50s.
Wow.
Same
Yeah.
church. She's a pillar.
So yeah, I'm curious, what else can you tell us about her? Like what can you tell us about her with her faith? Cause like you don't wait, like I said, we don't get to 99 with that perspective and without a lifetime of like repetition, little acts of faith, big acts of faith. Like this is something that she's been doing, I assume, her whole life.
Absolutely.
And so what else can we know about her that would inspire or give us encouragement?
Well, I wish you could hear her voice. It's one of my favorite sounds in the universe, the sound of my grandma's voice. It is very seasoned and weathered. She talked like this. She never really quite could say my name right, so she called me Marion. Marion. She's got that just southern roots to her. She came up through the Great Migration by herself, got a job at a factory making shoes in Chicago. Eventually, her sisters came up. I wonder if that's where I get it from. I'm really, really, really close with my sisters. And so was she. So much so that they pooled their resources and they got a 3-flat on the west side of Chicago. Grandma had the top floor apartment. One sister had the middle apartment and the other sister had the basement apartment. So they all lived in the same building together. But I mentioned in the sermon, she buried my father.
Yeah.
I gave away my age a little bit, but she buried my father. He died right before I was born. She was married to her husband for 69 years. I had to check with my uncle to make sure I had that number right for this message. 69 years of marriage. And it was not all sunshine and roses. So I know she lived through a lot of heartache and brokenness over the course of 69 years. When my father died, he left some kids behind. Now I had my mom who raised me, but he had a few other daughters, my half sisters, who weren't really in a position to be raised by their moms. And so my grandma became their mother, essentially raised my sister, who's just above me, raised her from birth. And so, she was a mom. She became a grandma, and then she became mother to those kids. And then even one of my sisters, when she had her kids, now great grandma became mother to those kids.
Okay.
Wow.
So, she had kids in her house. She was raising children probably into her late 70s when my sister's youngest, finally kind of moved out onto his own. But it's been a lifetime of hardship, a lifetime of heavy lifting. Through all of it, I've known my grandmother to study the Bible anywhere and everywhere she can, whether that is on her own in her own personal study, or she loves, women's Bible study groups, whether that's at her historic Black church in Chicago, or she'd always go on these retreats. I don't know if they still do things like that, but it was really the heyday of like retreats that were like travel retreats. Like the women's retreat is going to Colorado next month. And, but like, that's what they do. They sit around, they study the Bible, they travel, but she was always looking for ways to engage herself in community, never isolate herself, keep her body moving, which is how she's still able to go up and down the stairs at 99 years old. She doesn't sleep on the top floor anymore. She did move down to the middle floor, but she's
still up some stairs.
Yeah, her house is not handicap accessible. She can't get into her home without, it looks like a brownstone, like from New York, with the front steps and the stoop and everything like that. So, she. I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah,
they don't make them like that.
That's exactly what I wrote down. I was like, they don't make them like they used to, and that's kind of the feeling I got. Yeah. And like I said, I know a number of people that where, especially in the last 15 years, it's like it's better or easier to just like go towards whatever I want versus the Lord or something.
So I saw something yesterday, and I don't even know if this is true, but it looked like it was a post, social media post, and it said National Geographic, so maybe it was true. But it was a picture of a buffalo covered in like snow and ice. It was a really cool picture. Have you seen this? It said the buffalo instinctively turn into the storm because they know it's the fastest way out of the storm. Where other animals will turn away from the storm, but it kind of only prolongs time spent in the storm because the storm's kind of chasing them. The buffalo will turn into the storm, face it head on because it's the fastest way out. And then the little article suggested, maybe there's a life lesson in there for us. Yeah. But I think that that's what my grandma was doing when we prayed that this cup should pass when we prayed for my aunt to be healed, which, by the way, this is the same aunt who in 2018 suffered a brain hemorrhage and had been bedridden since 2018. So 2018 to 2024, my grandmother became, again, full-time caretaker at, in her late 90s, full-time caretaker for her bedridden adult daughter, and had been doing that for many, many years until she passed this last June. Yeah. So my grandma saying, Lord, give me the strength for what I'm about to go through, was my grandma turning into the storm and facing it head on. Just give me the strength to get through it. Give me the strength for what I'm about to go through.
Yeah. And so on the flip side of that, it's like how in a culture that does glorify instant gratification, comfort, how do we teach endurance, like we've been talking about, hupomone, without sounding like we're just saying, grind it out or just push through it? Because there is, I think, a difference. But what's the difference, do you guys think, between grind it out or just push through it and endurance in our faith? What's kind of the difference there?
It sounds like one is a very secular mindset, the just grind it out. And the other is endure, but like with the strength of God and knowing that he's present with you and leaning into him. And like I said multiple times, grabbing on to the promises of God, knowing them for yourself. When I think of just grinding it out, without all of that stuff, without all of the promises of God and the things that we've been talking about in this series, his presence, his abiding presence, his strength, hupomone, it's depressing to me to think of, like, if that's all life is, it's just grinding it out on your own. That's very bleak.
Yeah.
I do think I agree. And I would say there's also just in general, a lack of grit in people today. I'm not even blaming young people, just anybody. Nobody can be bothered to deal with a little bit of hardship. Excuse me. One of the greatest gifts that I think I've ever experienced in my life has been the fact that I started traveling the world and being thrown into very uncomfortable situations, often where I did not know how I was going to get myself out of this one, or how I have memories of like getting vague instructions to show up at this town and go to this hotel and find this person. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting on a train, and like in India, and I'd end up in Bombay, and I'd start looking for that hotel. I'd get there and be like, hey, is this person here? They're not. Oh, great. And like things like that, which those types of situations, I think over time, year over year, started to build in me this general sense of like, okay, I understand how to navigate some sort of unexpected thing coming my way. And that's like, has nothing to do with faith. It's just a life, just life lessons. And so I'm so grateful that I did get that chance to live in other cultures and be thrust into situations that I didn't know how I was going to find my way out, because it develops grit in you. I do think there's a spiritual component to that though, where we also develop grit by having experiences that stretch us and push us. And if the only experiences that we have that stretch us and push us are those life-altering traumas, or those massive, like if you don't have anything that stretches you and pushes you, and then one day you lose a family member, like endurance will be very hard, because you've not built up any of the muscles for endurance. But if you have over time stretched yourself, and by that I mean willfully, intentionally put yourself in places through your faith that actually do stretch you, that you're just not going to be prepared. So for example, serving people sometimes, especially if you're serving in a place that's out of your comfort zone, that's the kind of thing that stretches you, and it puts you in a place where you have to depend on God to come through for you. That helps to build your endurance. And there are things we can do like that like help to shape us and not avoid conflict when it comes. So anyway, I think there's a non-faith component to it,
Yeah.
but it also is reflected in what our faith looks like.
Yeah.
Are we actually growing in endurance? Are we becoming people of grit?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I have not had the opportunity to travel the world, but when I think of, a season of my life, when I think of the word grit and I associate that with the season of my life, it's being a janitor for my kids' Lutheran school for 6 years.
Yeah.
Especially in the wintertime. I called it salt season. I'd mop that floor every day. And this was K through 8th grade. This is not it's not a teeny tiny school. There's 2 floors and it was a lot of work. And I was the only janitor in the entire school.
Right. And those hallways by the end of the day were probably the great salt flats.
Nasty. They were just gray with salt. And every single day, it's like, that old commercial Time to Make the Donuts. Like, here we go again. Here we go again. Am I really going to do this again? Lord, am I really going to do this one more time?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, for 6 years. But I did it for the reward that was waiting for my children, really. A solid education, wonderful school, our community. I would do it all over again, but it was really hard work, day in and day out, years on end, and just drudgerous work. It's not very rewarding, for me personally. To mop a floor was not very rewarding, but I did it because of the reward, because my kids were in a great school and they were happy, and it's what we needed at the time. Also, like I think about my grandma, I think about me. God has given us opportunities throughout our life to build up our endurance, and how we responded to those early opportunities informs how we are able to respond later in life or to larger calamities or whatever, I think about when my grandmother had Alzheimer's. My daughter was an infant. I lived 45 minutes away from my grandma on the north side of Chicago, which meant I had to fight traffic. Every other day was all I could afford to get from the north side of Chicago to the south suburbs to be able to help my elderly grandfather care for my grandmother, who was bedridden, who needed to be spoon fed and taken
This is a different grandma.
to the bathroom. Different grandma. This is my mom's mom. She passed in her 80s, but she died from Alzheimer's. And that was a season of grit.
Yeah.
And not knowing, okay, Lord, when are you going to call her home? It was obviously gut wrenching every day and heartbreaking to watch her body decline. When are you taking her home? Please have mercy on her, on my grandfather, and give me the strength and give me the grit to keep leaving my babies behind in Chicago. Jaden was 2, Desi was an infant. Give me the strength and the intestinal fortitude to keep coming down here and keep taking care of her. That season prepared me for my mother. And I never could have known that. It's just, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I think all of us can look back, that retrospective I was talking about, and see how God had prepared us in small ways, in big ways, for whatever challenge we're currently facing. I don't think anyone has 0 challenges and then suddenly here's a challenge I didn't prepare you for. I do think that He, in His mercy, gives us opportunity to develop our endurance throughout the course of our life in small ways and big ways. And sometimes, yes, like even though I'd helped my grandma, kind of transition in those last couple of years of her life, even though I did that, and that did build a certain degree of endurance within me, hupomone, nothing could have prepared me for my mom's cancer.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, He did prepare me, but it also feels like nothing could have prepared me. The point is we gain grit, steadfastness, endurance, perseverance, all kinds of ways. If it's mopping a floor, traveling the world, taking care of a sick loved one, all kinds of opportunities are brought our way to build our endurance.
Yeah.
Which we miss out on when our posture is one of avoidance.
Yeah.
Or if we just shut it out, or we flee, or we ghost people. If we step away from the friction, then we don't get the refinement.
Yeah. Turn into the storm. Like the buffalo.
You used imagery of a corn maze to illustrate hardships or confusion.
Yeah.
And needing to find a footbridge within the maze or to get perspective.
By the way, I thought the story was really well told, and the thimblefuls of rationed water was like was very vivid. Oh, the sippy cup.
Yeah, you've been out of the game for a while. That's all I could think.
That had me.
It was a novice
very
mistake.
vivid.
Yeah.
Honestly, I know. Let's do this gigantic corn maze that's going to take over an hour.
Sippy cup.
Then we'll have lunch.
Yeah.
Very, very poor move on my part.
It was well told.
So what do we say? And we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I want to revisit it. What do we say to people who feel like they're perpetually stuck in the maze, or they don't see a footbridge?
Yeah.
Or how do we encourage people to hold on to faith when the journey feels futile?
Yeah.
Is it even possible to endure if you're not looking at the bigger picture of that the footbridge would provide?
Yes, it is, because sometimes you don't have a footbridge. Sometimes you don't have that kind of perspective on your own. I said 3 things. I said, hold on to the promises of God, i.e. search them out and know them for yourself, like my grandma does. Lift your eyes and ask for help are the three ways that I suggest, those of us who feel like we're in the middle of our own labyrinth of life. And I don't know if you do this, but I see names and faces of our congregation when I write. All the time I see it. And I think, well, how is this going to strike that person? And how, if I was going through what they were going through, how would I receive this? And what is it that I want for that person? And what's the best way to convey that? So I said it in the message. I know that there are people in our midst. Some of them I couldn't even look at their faces because I already cried, but I would have ugly cried if I would have looked in their general direction. That is my prayer for the people of grace who are finding themselves in the middle of life's disorienting labyrinth or maze, that you would ask for help. I was with somebody last night. They're suffering. And I went to their house and I made them dinner. Never done that before. Never cooked in their house. And next time I'm bringing my own pots and pans.
I knew that was coming. I knew
my
that was
Lord.
coming.
And a handful of seasonings. However, I went and I cooked for my friend who is suffering. And what it felt like was I got down on my hands and knees and I let her stand on my back for a minute so that she could get her eyes above the corn. Like, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. And I think that's what we do for one another. That's what we do. If you sit next to somebody in church and you know that they're trapped in the middle of a corn maze, you can be that footbridge for them. You can help them seek out the scripture. You can find encouraging scriptures and send it to them. And then say, hey, I don't even know if this scripture encourages you or if this scripture makes you mad, but like, you want to talk about it? Yeah,
that's a good talking point, because I've wondered after your sermon, like, what role, things that make you mad, things that make you doubt, things, people that are in the midst of their suffering, like, what role does doubt have to play in our endurance? Like, is there room for doubt?
Yeah.
when we're talking about hupomone or
I don't know. We might be splitting a hair or riding a very fine line. Because what I see in Lamentations is my endurance has failed and my hope in the Lord is gone.
Right.
So not even like, I doubt you're there. It's my hope is gone. And so when his hope is gone, he says, but I call to mind the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. Was he doubting, or was he like just certain that his hope was gone? Either way, he plants a flagpole in the ground in the middle of the maze when he says, but I call to mind that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They're new every morning. Therefore, I will hope in him. He goes from saying my hope is gone to I will hope.
Yeah.
I will hope.
Yeah. I think that's the beauty of lament.
You love lament.
I do. I love lament because it's like, I feel an invitation to doubt. I feel an invitation to be viscerally mad or emotional or whatever. Yeah. But I'm also invited to turn my eyes back to, like, after that's done, because that's the like pattern of lament, isn't it? It's like,
well, in the case of Lamentations 3, it's in the middle of it. And that's
Right.
what I love the most. It didn't end on like a happy note. It's lament.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
call to mind, I have hope, footbridge, perspective, hope. And then he comes down from that footbridge and goes right back into lament. And I feel like that is such a poignant picture
Yeah.
of real life.
That's a long callback.
I know we've got a couple here today.
First episode ever. I said poignant.
Oh, how far we've come.
That's the very first episode you just
Yeah.
call back to.
But that's one of the things I wrote and rewrote this message so many times, and nobody knows that except Barry, who was having a fever dream.
yeah, you guys got into an argument about soul.
We didn't get into
soul
an
care.
argument at all, but
There's no way to know whether it was an argument. I was just writing.
especially when I'm not sure, I will always defer to Barry. Like, take a look at this.
It's risky.
Take a look at what I've written. Tell me how this strikes you, Yeah. Anyway, so I did that. I don't do that every time I speak, but with this message in particular, I just wanted to make sure that I ran it by him for a couple of different reasons. But in one iteration of this message, I wanted to say something to the effect of, I don't want a soundbite faith or a soundbite Christianity. And what I mean by that is a beautifully embossed leather-bound journal that says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He does. It's beautiful. He's also with me when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Just a few verses down.
Right.
Here we are, me and him.
Yeah.
Valley of the shadow of death. We love the green pastures line. Sometimes, that's a familiar one, so most of us know it, but sometimes we neglect to associate it within its context of also,
Right.
he's with me when things are super terrible. The Lamentations 3 passage was my example of that.
Yeah.
The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Wait a minute. You've walled me in.
Yeah.
My hope
Yeah.
is gone. The soundbite is the good part,
Right.
but it's so much more powerful when you see it in context that this pristine, beautiful, pastoral, flowery soundbite came out of someone's deep, deep anguish and grief and a sense of being completely lost and forsaken.
Yeah. Just real quick. My favorite thing about the way the biblical authors talk is they don't talk in sound bites. They intentionally, like, we're the ones who make sound bites out of their words. What they've really done is they speak in poetry, and poetry is getting into some deep truths about the reality of the world. Like, in the midst of lament, like,
Yes.
the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, but that doesn't change my circumstances.
And I'm finding I have a handful of situations right now where I think some of these folks were raised on sound bites.
Yeah.
And now they're in the maze and they're like, wait a minute. I thought that he was, the green pastures guy.
Right.
Wait a minute.
Why would God let bad things happen to good people? It's
Yes.
like, where'd you even get that
Right.
idea that that's how it works? That
Right.
it's so simple. It's like so much more.
Yeah. So let's search out the scripture together.
Yeah.
And let's consider, what it's actually teaching us,
Right.
what it's actually saying to us.
But I will say though, like, doesn't that it could open up a can of worms,
Yeah.
because it's like Hebrews 10:34 says, you knew there were better things waiting for you that will last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 35, do not throw away this confident trust in the Lord. Remember the great reward it brings you. The can of worms, I guess, would be like, if that's the scripture I'm leaning on or looking for, does God always reward our faithfulness and waiting? I feel like sometimes people would say, I was faithful
Mm-hmm.
and I waited.
Yeah, but what's
And
the reward?
Right. So what's the reward?
Exactly.
Is it, when's the reward coming? When's the reward part coming? So that's the can of worms. When's the reward part coming?
Well, that's why I went back to Jesus's words about those who live in me, those who believe in me will never, ever die. Do you believe this? That was the hope that spread far and wide with those early believers. The hope of being resurrected with Christ, the hope that this earth and its in its decay is not all that there is. They had this hope. And also that's why I wanted to camp out on the soul.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we talk about the soul enough as a culture in general. But they did. They sure did. And that's why there's messages. That's why there's mentions throughout the Old Testament and New Testament that are centered on the soul.
Yeah.
And the joy and the strength and the promises that lay ahead for the soul. Now, where I had to touch base with Barry was like, I agree that I don't want us to think that in, the great beyond, that we're just disembodied souls just floating around on a cloud, right?
Right.
But we do ourselves a disservice when we neglect to talk about the soul,
right?
Because, we don't want to give people, this harp on cloud picture in their head. Yeah. No, I was struck, and this is a half-baked thought, which is a dangerous thing to say with a microphone in front of your mouth, but
I got a mute button ready.
Did my mom die? Jesus said, those who live in me and believe in me will never, ever die. That word ever, just, oh my goodness, never, ever. So then what did happen? Did she just continue to live?
Well, you've come to the right place.
You know what I mean?
Because I know, I do know what you mean.
And isn't that so hopeful? If I sit there and think, and this happened after the 11 o'clock service, I was sitting in the front row, just came down from speaking the message. And I felt like that was from my heart. Like, yet shall she live.
Yeah.
Though she die, yet shall she live. We don't grieve as those who have no hope. So what is the reward?
Yeah.
Right.
That's the hope.
The early Christians constantly referred to their brothers and sisters who had died as having fallen asleep, right? And it's very common for modern people to assume that must just be some euphemism for death. They passed away.
Yeah.
They've fallen asleep. Really, they just mean they died. But what if that's what they literally meant? As far as the way that they conceived of it, my soul slept and it awoke in a resurrected body. Like that's the way that they see our storyline. So that Jesus saying never ever die, he's referring to the idea of soul death. Like there is no non-existence. There is no passing away in the sense of what we generally think of. It's no, you sleep. Yeah. And when you awake, it is to this new creation that God has prepared for you. That's the hope. That's the promise. And we get bogged down talking about exactly what does that look like and how and when and where and all that stuff. But the point is, that's what we're hoping in.
Right. And the hope, as my body starts to deteriorate, that my soul has wings. My soul grows stronger while my outward self is wasting away. My inward self is being renewed day by day.
Maybe, right? Like that's what the soul care part is for. It does.
Right.
It's just not going to just happen. Like you're not going to turn into your grandma with
the
heavy lifted soul.
Right. Oh, you mean maybe in the sense of it depends on whether you live in a way that is where it's headed.
Like, we can say that we believe in Christ and our soul could be weak.
Right.
But.
Right. But I wanted people to have the hope of, especially specific people that I had in my mind. My body is not what it used to be, but my soul not only survives, but is resilient and will only grow in strength or has the potential to grow in strength and can be stronger than ever despite everything I've gone through, because the soul is the part that is going to live beyond this shell of a body.
Right. Not
to say that we won't have a physical body. That's where we get kind of caught in the weeds. But if this if this little brown container that I'm in is the thing that will go into the ground, my soul will never ever die.
Right. And the thing that
stuff.
The thing that I was in my fever dream state writing about all this stuff was the idea that in my own personal opinion of how things work, you can't really separate the body and the soul. It's an embodied soul that we are. And the two are constantly feeding into one another. Like it's the state of your soul can sometimes determine the health of your body and vice versa. I mean, the way that what your body experiences can affect your soul. That's my opinion. But I even think, for example, when we talk about strengthening your soul, you use the expression of like weightlifting almost.
Yeah, my grandma can outlift me.
Yeah. So weightlifting, by its very nature, you are actually like ripping tears into your muscles. That's what you're doing by lifting things you're not able to do. And but that's what makes you stronger, because then it regrows, it heals, and it grows stronger.
Yeah.
I think in a mystical way, even the hardships that our bodies experience, my body's not like it used to be, or I went through this trauma, or I've had cancer or whatever, which we think of as like always by definition, like a negative thing. There are ways in which that can be the muscle tearing of our soul, because it is through that hardship, even with our bodies, that God can then strengthen us and make us more resilient and make us more like your grandma. And so I think, to me, that's how there's like an interplay. There's a dynamic there. And yes, this body is temporary and temporal and will pass away, but the new us that is resurrected from the ground will be a resurrected version of our embodied soul now, which I don't see how that is going to miss involving some of the physical things that we have become or experienced in this life. That's a part of who we are. And so I don't know, it will all be redeemed, and we will see God's love working through it in how we are redeemed. But I see this beautiful interplay happening between the two. So that's what I was emailing about. I'm sure people would be so interested to read the back and forth in our emails.
We're such nerds.
Literally,
Oh my
I started the
goodness.
email. All right, Marion, this is what I think is true as far as like church orthodoxy. And then here's my opinion.
That's what you said. You said you are well within the limits of Orthodox Christianity.
I did, just to be sure that you knew. And then I was like, now let me
Friday night at like 9 p.m.
This was I don't know what this was. There's no way to know. I was sitting there. I was probably sweating as I was writing this. Anyway, things we do for fun.
All right. So last question. Throughout this series, I keep having the same question. Like, how do I know I'm enduring in my faith or just experiencing a challenge? How are we to tell the difference between spiritual endurance and simply surviving through difficult times? Like, I question how I'm supposed to know if I'm enduring the way God intends, or if it's just I'm going through a tough time and that's just part of life, or I created it for myself. And I created the situation and now I'm going through a tough time or whatever.
Yeah.
My thought is that you framed endurance as an active practice. You said, do God's will, not just know God's will.
I didn't say that. The writer to the Hebrews did, but
Well,
yes.
then you put the emphasis on do.
I mean, he that person,
Or
Priscilla,
she. Or she.
Priscilla, or he.
You said do, not know.
Yes, I added the not know. That was me.
Is that the distinguisher? I felt like that was the distinguisher for me, but what would you guys say? Like, how do you distinguish between I am enduring spiritual endurance the way God intends, or I'm just going through this really hard time?
You're getting a little bit into what next week will be about.
Oh,
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I don't want to give away. I don't want to give away where we're going, but that's kind of been the question, or one of the many. Oof, this has been a series of wrestling for me. I don't know if it has been for you, but one of the many things I've been wrestling with throughout this series is what you just described. Because a lot of these scripture passages are being addressed to people who are suffering persecution. In fact, the passage we'll be looking at this upcoming Sunday is just that. The writer is talking to a group of Jews who've been scattered, who are experiencing persecution. At this point, they weren't like being slain, but it was things like boycotts and stuff like that. Like they had some economic oppression and persecution, and they were definitely kind of ostracized. But it was persecution for their faith. That's something that needs to be endured. But then there's, I'm having car trouble, and it's a bummer and it's a financial hardship, but it's not necessarily being persecuted for your faith, but it is a trial of a sort, right? And anyway, those are the kinds of things I've been wrestling with too. Or add to that list, so there's persecution, and then there's hard times we go through, and then there's tragedy and grief, right? So how do those fit into this concept of hupomone and endurance and perseverance? And yeah, how do we know we're responding in the way that we ought to be responding? I will talk a little bit about that this coming Sunday.
Yeah. And to me, my answer would just similarly, I would just say we've covered different angles of endurance each week in this series. I would say the answer to the question is like, am I enduring well? Am I enduring the way that God would desire of me? Well, week 1, are you enduring in such a way that you are able to even begin to get glimmers of joy, or if not joy, at least confidence that this is shaping you? Week 2, is your endurance at all related to pushback from the brokenness of our world? Or is it just your own selfishness or whatever that's led you here? Week 3, are you enduring alone? Because if you are, that's not what God has designed for you. He wants you to endure together. You can't endure alone. Yeah. So are you enduring with others? And then just this past week, like, is your endurance causing you to lift your eyes beyond yourself to seek hope in what lies beyond and hope in the promises of God? That it's not a really concrete answer. It's just a way of saying, does your hope resemble the hope does your endurance resemble the endurance that we've been talking about this whole series? Or does it just resemble, getting through something tough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And those things that you just mentioned, those themes from each week, they apply to being mistreated because of your faith in Christ. They also apply to when the chips are down and your car is broken, or you've suffered a health crisis or anything like that. You can take those principles that you just rattled off and apply them to a myriad of trials and tribulations and troubles of all kinds. So, yeah.
All right. So you're coming back next week to...
I am. I'm coming back next week to this show.
So here's my... no, I won't say that. I was going to say my second least favorite thing about you guys.
Oh,
but my first favorite, never mind.
What?
I said earlier, my least favorite thing is that you guys are like,
we're going to teach you all this stuff about the Bible. Is that what you said?
No. I said you guys don't take medicine.
Oh yeah. That's what, yeah.
Well, my second least favorite thing is that every time Maren preaches, she's like, I don't know how I'm ever going to get this done.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just like, true every time.
I don't know. It's due Wednesday and it's Thursday and it's never going to happen. She spends the next 4 days doing things other than writing the sermon. Yeah. And then she cranks out a really touching,
absolute banger,
touching, meaningful sermon. I know. And it happens every time.
Well, yeah.
Obviously, it is the grace and mercy of God. It is the Holy 100%. Spirit and my prayer team that prays me through all of it. Yeah. They rock.
And for what it's worth, though, it happens to me too every week.
You're I don't know how this is going to happen.
I'm like, I think this is going to be a disaster. Yeah. I don't know how this is going to come together.
Yeah, that's my second least favorite thing about you guys.
Yeah. But talk to Liv because she gets on my case about that all the time, and about not taking medicine actually. So yeah, maybe they're connected.
Yeah, because I feel like a sense of as a colleague, I'm like, all right, I need to feel a sense of ownership of guarding your time, and I don't want to bother you on certain days or whatever. Come to find out, you'll just get it done. It just happens.
Well, you kind of have to. It's the job.
That's right.
Yeah, but it's not what you think it is. You think it's going to be a disaster, and it's always.
I'm learning to trust I'm learning to trust the process, including involving the Holy Spirit in different ways throughout the process. Yeah. And even on Sunday mornings. I mean, I remember when you first were like, wait, you're making, sorry.
You were so close, Barry. You were so close.
I'm sorry. I remember early on you were like, wait, you're making changes now on a Sunday morning? Cause I always go through my message and make a few last minute, but it's even that it's it's part of the process of letting the Spirit speak, even on Saturday, like final thoughts, like, oh, that's what I want to make sure not to forget to emphasize.
Yeah. And I do feel like I'm pressed for time quite often. And things come up, friends that are in need and congregants who just need a pastor to talk to. And every time I'm like, I have a message I have to write. Yeah. But then I trust the process, and I trust that God knew that I would be at that friend's house making dinner. And God knew that I would be on the phone with this person. And God is going to give me grace. He said, my grace is sufficient for you. So there I go, holding on to the promises of God, knowing them for myself. Okay, Lord, you know I've got like 17 hours left. Your grace is sufficient for me. I'm going to sign off from this podcast, go home, lock myself in my office, and by 5:00 tomorrow, Sunday's message will be written.
All right. Great. She kind of gave us a heads up of what's next, but Barry, do you kind of want to give us a heads up of 2 weeks from now or a couple weeks from now when we start our new sermon series?
Yeah. So we got Marin finishing up the series this Sunday, and then we're starting a whole new series called Reimagine. And I'm excited about it. I've mentioned in service a couple times, it's going to be an initiative that goes along with the sermon series that's going to be super, meaningful, probably like a kind of a turning point for us as a church, which I'm super excited to share all the details with everybody on February 9th. But it comes with a sermon series, which is me for 7 weeks in a row. So we'll see how that goes. That's my first, that's my first back to back sermon. So I'm kind of nervous about that, but it'll be book of Philippians. You know, I love Philippians. It'll be all about the Apostle Paul kind of as he's languishing in jail, possibly about to die, and he sends off a letter to his friends in Philippi. His beloved friends in Philippi. And in a lot of ways, these could be seen as sort of his last thoughts to them. Like, here's kind of, as I pass the torch to this new generation, here are the things I don't want you to forget. And so what is it that we might want to hear as we kind of, in a lot of ways, are a bit like a new generation at Grace, a church that's now going on our 34th year. We're kind of a 34-year-old person trying to figure out who they are. And so in a way, it's like, what are the past generations wanting us to hear, just as Paul passed on final words to the Philippians?
Cool. That kicks off February 9th.
Yep.
Cool. And we got baptisms this weekend.
Yes.
So that's always exciting. I think we got almost 20 people signed up to be baptized. Yeah.
Amazing.
Cool. Well, we'll be back next week. But until then, Marin, will you please send us out?
I will. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God.
And we'll see you on the other side of Sunday.